to come to us. In the person of Dr. Lennox H. Small. And his bio will be presented to us by our Vice President of John J. Bergen chapter. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for Mistress Winsome Jones. Wow, isn't she looking good?
Thank you, Brother Evero. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so I have the distinct pleasure of presenting to you our keynote speaker, Dr. Lennox H. Small. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Dr. Small. It's very hard to tell you a little bit because he does have an extensive bio. However, I will do my best. So Dr. Small serves as the supervisor of humanities in the Department of Curriculum and Instruction in New Brunswick, New Jersey. Dr. Small has worked in several New Jersey schools, including Benjamin Franklin Middle School and Teaneck High School, where he served as an assistant principal for curriculum and instruction. Teaneck High School has a student load of approximately 1,400 students and 200 faculty and staff members. From 2001 to 2004, Dr. Small served as the department chairperson for social studies at Teaneck High School. While serving in this capacity, Dr. Small received several awards. In 2002, he received a national consortium for teaching in Asia through Princeton University. In 2002, Dr. Small also received a grant at the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University. Dr. Small, in 2003, received the Fulbright Hays Fellowship in South Africa. July 2006, Dr. Small was selected as a U.S. educator for a U.S. educator delegation to China. He traveled to various regions of China and formed partnerships with public schools in Beijing. Dr. Small serves on the board of Rutgers University Graduate School of Education Advisory Council. It is clear from his bio that Dr. Small is a visionary. During his time as principal of North Plainfield Middle School, Dr. Small was part of a restructuring project that led him to be the first middle school principal in the district's history. This allowed him and his team to create a new brand for the middle school. Dr. Small is also the co-founder of MAILS, which stands for Mentoring and Learning Equals Success. The program is now based in North Plainfield and has received the Benjamin E. Mays Award from the Metuchen, I hope I'm saying that correctly, Edison branch of the NAACP for their various initiatives. As far as education, Dr. Small is a shining example of academic achievement. He completed his bachelor's degree at Rutgers University and has 2 master's degrees, one from Columbia University and one from Kean University. Dr. Small received his doctorate in education from the University of Pennsylvania. I would like to add my personal piece to this awesome bio. Dr. Small is a family man with one beautiful wife and 3 beautiful daughters. The Dr. Small that I have come to know is a very down-to-earth human being who has done and continues to do everything in his power to empower the youth and impact his community while making the world a better place. Without further ado, I bring to you Dr. Lennox H. Small. Please welcome him.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So good evening, everyone. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, Ms. Jones. Madam State President, Ms. Clayton Hunt, Bergen County President Sharon Luars, Ms. Winsome Jones, and members of the Jamaica Organization of New Jersey, and all of the guests that are present this evening. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you for a few moments. Although the last 12 years of my professional life I've been serving in educational leadership, I am still very much a teacher at heart. I know it's late in the hour, but that means this evening's class will feature a title and will be followed with a homework assignment. So today's lesson is titled The Heroes Among Us. Your homework assignment will be given at the end of class. This evening, I'm going to be transparent. And I want you to come with me on this journey, as you should be transparent also in your reflections. I'm well aware that this is Black History Month, but this message is not about the go-to trifecta of Black history. Dr. Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, and Harriet Tubman. I have a tremendous amount of respect for those great leaders. But this message is about your parents, your grandparents, your great-grandparents, and other family members. The sacrifices they had to make and the pain they had to endure. The heroes among us. The theme for this evening is the Black family, representation, identity, and diversity. So several years ago, I was in London, England to attend the funeral of my grandfather. And I was standing outside the famous St. Paul Cathedral in London. And I was in a conversation with a gentleman, and he posed what should be a very simple question to most people. He asked me, "Where are you from?" I have always struggled with my response to that question. The question speaks to your family, what you represent, your identity, and your diversity. I am well aware of the audience tonight, and many will be quick to say Jamaica or another country in the Caribbean, or maybe you're from the South. But I'm going to talk tonight about Caribbeans in general because I think Caribbeans are the most interesting and entertaining people on the planet. For the non-Caribbeans here tonight, let me give you some facts that pertain to Caribbeans that you must be aware of. And I may use the term Caribbeans and West Indians interchangeably. So first of all, if you travel the world, no matter where you go, and I tell you, no matter where you go, you are bound to run into at least one of these groups of people. Indians, Chinese, Nigerians, Guyanese, and Jamaicans. Second, everyone knows that Guyanese make the best pepper pot. There's nothing like the Bajan fly fish. And you must have a Trinidadian friend at all times because Trinis make the best roti. And nobody makes stewed chicken like Jamaicans. Those are facts. So again, I ponder the question, where are you from? My answer to that question often makes people puzzled. And I imagine it is tied to my life features, which I have no control over. It speaks to the compartment and the boxes we unconsciously check for people in terms of where they think we belong based on our physical appearance. I am a man who was born in London, England, to a Guyanese mother and a father from Barbados. My childhood was spent in London, Guyana, and the USA. Although the majority of my life has been now in the US, and I am a naturalized citizen, married to an American woman with American children, I have been told that I'm not truly American. I am no longer uniquely British as the older gentleman that St. Paul Cathedral alluded to. I left Guyana too long ago to be considered Guyanese. At least that's what Guyanese people tell me. And my Bajan family insists that I not deny my Bajan blood. So I will continue to have difficulty answering the question in a word or two, regardless of what passport that I may possess. Given the history of the Black experience in Britain and the United States, will I ever be truly considered British or American? The reality is that I have always been an other in a transatlantic identity cloak. This is critical to reflect on as we explore the Caribbean diaspora, and many young people wonder, how did we get here? And the here tonight refers to the United States, Canada, and the UK, just to name a few. The year 2020 has shown us that we have an obvious pandemic, and it has also revealed that we have an epidemic of ignorance. We saw it during an outcry for social justice, and it was evident as we started 2021, and we encountered the three I's during the first Wednesdays in January. The first Wednesday, we had insurrection. The second Wednesday, we had impeachment. And the third Wednesday, we had inauguration, all in the same place, the U.S. Capitol. This has left us in a state of instability. The notion of justice for all is under constant scrutiny as we are left wondering if that concept is applicable to everyone. We are searching for answers for how we define ourselves, our community, and nation. This is evident in many of our families. The search for clear answers in Caribbean and Black families in general can be like trying to steal gold in Fort Knox. Too often, if you want to find out something about intimate details about your family's past, you have to attend a funeral. I remember attending a relative funeral in Brooklyn several years ago, and I was hugging my cousins. An unfamiliar face introduced himself to me, and when I inquired aloud to my cousins, I was met with a quick shh. They pulled me over later to explain that that guy was the outside child. Funerals can be comical experiences depending upon the deceased, but they should never be the epicenter of understanding our journey to connect the dots to our current existence. As a child, and even now, I'm always nosy and interested in the journey of Black folks, because there's a story behind how Black folks ended up in certain communities. They didn't just randomly end up moving to a neighborhood by chance. If you have not seen director Steve McQueen's series of short films called Small Acts, it is a must. In fact, it is part of your homework assignment. Small Acts depicts the experience of West Indians in London from the mid-1960s to the mid-1980s. What Steve McQueen shows us is what many family members refuse to speak about. Leaving the comfort of the West Indies to go for opportunities in the US, Canada, and England sounds like a romantic voyage to the land where streets are paved with gold and the culture is imbued with meritocracy and justice for all. Small acts can trigger both anger and inspiration simultaneously. When I used to ask my parents about how they met, I always got a vague response. My mother said, "I met your father at a party. We got married, and of course, when you were a baby, we got divorced." For years, I would say to myself, man, that was one hell of a party. My father passed away 2 years ago in Barbados, and I was finally able to dig some things out of him regarding his journey to London. And I took a historical analysis of it. You see, at the end of World War II, England, along with other Allied forces, had defeated Germany. However, the victory came at a great cost for England and the British Empire. While the other Allied countries celebrated victory, England was crushed economically and politically. Their image as a global power and leader was in need of major repair. London was left in shambles, and there was a shortage of skilled labor to aid in the rebuilding that was essential to compete in the 20th century and beyond. Once hailed as the greatest transportation system in the world, the London transport sought an unlikely partnership. In collaboration with the Barbadian government in 1956, a recruitment effort emerged. Advertisements were placed in the local newspapers and on the radio. Applicants were sent to Bridgetown to complete an application, take a test, and be part of an interview process. Those who were selected then boarded a ship and took a 4-week journey across the Atlantic Ocean to England. My mother would take a similar journey 4 years later when she came to England, but she took a plane. I have thought about the irony of that journey because 200 years prior, the British placed West Africans on ships as human cargo to work the sugar plantations throughout the Caribbean. And in the midst of desperation, the British were now asking and seeking the descendants of those slaves to get on a ship to help rebuild a nation that once enslaved them and colonized them. Upon arrival to England, West Indians encountered coldness for the first time. In addition to the cold temperatures of their new home, they were greeted with the frigid nature of racism that was rampant and was both overt and covert. My father saw the advertisement in the paper and was part of the first wave of recruits in 1956. He was trained and served as an engineer for the London Transport. A brave generation of Bajans and other Caribbeans gave their talents and sacrifices to save the UK despite the hardships and discrimination they encountered when they arrived. Today, the United Kingdom remains a global power. Although the history books do not give the credit they rightly deserve, these young people that were part of that migration to England saved England from doom. This was a generation of heroes, the heroes among us. My mother left Guyana and traveled 4,500 miles across the Atlantic at the age of 21 to pursue her dream of nursing. One of her younger brothers, my Uncle Patrick, left Guyana a few years later at the age of 17 to study economics at Inter-American University in Puerto Rico and later receive his doctorate at Kent State University in Ohio. A few months shy before my 12th birthday, as a single parent, my mother took another bold move to come across the pond again and this time immigrate to the U.S. with her 2 children. These examples can be heard over and over again from many West Indian families who were in search of opportunities. They went to England, and when the British limited immigration, they went to Canada and here in the U.S. When I was a teenager in Brooklyn, New York, I remember listening to the intoxicating beats of hip-hop. That was the golden age of hip-hop. When rapper Biz Markie said a line in one of his lyrics, it stopped me in my tracks. He said, "Make you cooperate with the rhythm. That is what I give them. Reagan is the prez, but I voted for Shirley Chisholm." I immediately thought aloud to my peers, who is Shirley Chisholm? She once said, "I want history to remember not just as the first Black woman to be elected to Congress, not as the first Black woman to have made a bid for the presidency of the United States, but as a Black woman who lived in the 20th century and dared to be herself. I want to be remembered as a catalyst for change in America." Shirley Chisholm is a product of a Guyanese father and a mother from Barbados. She planted the seeds for Kamala Harris to take the oath as the first female vice president of the United States, a woman whose father comes from Yard. And for the non-Caribbeans in the room, that means he's Jamaican. Chisholm's ascensions to political power align with the global synchronization of a transformative movement that those of African descent redefine the world and themselves. In the 1960s, West Indians were fighting for equality in England, Africans and Caribbeans fighting to abolish colonial rule by the British, and Black folks here in the U.S. were fighting for civil rights. In 2020 and the early part of 2021, we are witnessing an awakening of this global synchronization in the fight for justice. Personally, I have been struggling with what I could have said, or anyone could have said, to Ahmaud Arbery, Trayvon Martin, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd that would have saved their lives. Ahmaud Arbery was jogging in his neighborhood. Trayvon Martin was walking home in his neighborhood. Breonna Taylor was sleeping in her apartment. And George Floyd complied with everything the police officers asked him to do. Yet each of them lost their lives in senseless acts of violence. We are in the middle of a new revolution. Education, policy, economics, healthcare, identity. And you must ask yourself, what is my role? Or maybe you're waiting for some other mythical figure to come along and do the work for you. When I was about 10 years old and living in England, my grandmother came from Guyana and was living with us for about a year. It was a year I remember fondly. My grandmother was a remarkable woman. She was a single parent that raised 4 children and educated all of them. She was from an educated family, and she believed that education and God were not to be taken for granted. I remember vividly that my grandmother would sit me on her lap as a young child as she listened to the radio via the BBC. She always wanted to know what was going on in Guyana and throughout the world. She would often yell back at us at the radio if she disagreed with certain topics that were mentioned. She was indeed a Renaissance woman. She was a midwife, and her home was an active place where pregnant women came in and out. Everyone in the community knew her. She was also an entrepreneur. She was a caterer, a seamstress, and she also sold eggs and chickens that she raised in her backyard. During the year she was in London, we were all assembled in front of the TV to watch a movie about the Jonestown Massacre. For those who do not know about the issue, it was a cult leader, Jim Jones, and his followers. He led a group from the U.S. to the jungles of Guyana. When some of the members of the group wanted to leave, he forced all of his followers to participate in a mass suicide by drinking Kool-Aid that was laced with potassium cyanide, hence the term drinking the Kool-Aid. Throughout the movie, my grandmother was visibly agitated. My grandmother was Guyanese to the core and did not appreciate even the most subtle reference to Guyana with this incident. At the end of the movie, she sat me down to review what had just transfixed me on the screen. She could not believe that a man convinced a group of people to leave California, to travel to Guyana, and then go into the interior of the country to create a community and call it paradise on earth, simply because Jim Jones said he was ordained by God to do so. What my grandmother was saying to me is that I have an obligation, a duty, a responsibility to be thinking and exploring for myself, and not to become victims of fads or the charismatic voices with no substance to accompany it. The revolution that we are in the midst of is frightening to many because they're sensing and seeing people think consciously in a manner that is attempting to annihilate systemic oppression. In 2020 and 2021, we are reconnected globally to formalize the announcement that our Black lives matter. We have a common denominator for justice, but we are all not the same. We can celebrate our quest for justice while we simultaneously embrace our diversity, the uniqueness in our talents, faiths, and ideologies. As a people, we have been enslaved, Jim Crowed, and systematically oppressed. But that is not what defines us, and is not the sum total of our story. Please, please, please do not fall victim to the danger of the single story. It is amazing how we have and continue to overcome these traumas. It is a journey that is wrapped with faith, courage, and resilience. There is no other group of people on the earth that has had to endure this journey, to now have to announce in the 21st century that, again, our Black lives matter. We are by far not a monolithic group. I often find myself reminding people of this diversity and uniqueness. Anguilla is not Angola. Guyana is not Ghana. Barbados, Barbuda, and Bermuda are 3 different countries. Haiti is part of an island. And please remember this, if you don't remember anything else. Everyone with a Caribbean accent is not Jamaican. We have different journeys and experiences, but we are our ancestors' wildest dreams despite it all. We love to hide behind the mask of discomfort. This is evident in our nation's schools, and I can speak to this as an educator. We don't want to address the harsh realities of our past. This great state of New Jersey passed what's called the Amistad legislation in 2002, almost 20 years ago. The tenets of the Amistad indicate that all school districts in the state must infuse the teaching of African American history throughout the curriculum as a norm, not just during the 28 days of February, but it is by far the most ignored mandate in the state. The explosion of events in 2020 has now seen a renewed interest in this mandate. This is akin to the journey in our families. It is time to stop hiding behind the mask of discomfort. Tell the stories to your families. Tell them of what life is like without a green card. How many people use Susu to help with their financial needs? The mental and emotional turmoil that you experience when you miss the comforts of home, the tears you shed, and the prayer that you prayed. Then they will understand the success that you experience and what it takes to be resilient. Scripture tells us in Proverbs, for wisdom will enter your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. Discretion will protect you, and understanding will guard you. Seek wisdom with passion and energy as you seek diamonds and rubies. It is a natural human goal to get knowledge, especially of who we are and from whence you came. As I begin to bring this to a close, I want to state that there are two words that my Jamaican friends and extended family members say to me that always terrifies me. I love my Jamaican family and extended family, but there are two words. And here are the two words that when Jamaicans say to me, it terrifies me to the core. And the words are, soon come. Soon come. Soon come can mean 5 minutes, it can mean 5 hours, or it could be 5 days. It is hard to plan for soon come. There's a great uncertainty with soon come. I had a contractor several years ago. He said he'll be here at 9. He was Jamaican. I was ready at 9. 10 o'clock comes, 11 o'clock comes. No call, nothing. 12:30, I called him. He finally picked up. I said, where are you? I'm waiting. He said, yeah, respect, Bridget. I soon come. He came the next day. Soon come. Let me take you back historically for a moment. All the way back to the beginning of this nation. In 1787, in the city of Philadelphia, leaders of that time period gathered to create a document that would transform how humanity would view the role of government. They formed what we embrace as the United States Constitution for a country that was barely 11 years old. When Benjamin Franklin, one of the architects of the document, exited Independence Hall at the conclusion after months of deliberation, he was met by many anxious citizens in the area. There was an exchange between Benjamin Franklin and a woman that history calls Mrs. Powell. That's all we know of her. But that exchange would plant the seeds for how we would view this country. Without hesitation, Mrs. Powell approached Benjamin Franklin and asked, what have we got, a republic or a monarchy? Without missing a beat, Benjamin Franklin responded by stating, a republic, if you can keep it. Author Eric Metaxas explores the issue with a book of the same name. In hindsight, it makes sense that Mrs. Powell would pose such a profound question. After all, the brilliance of this new document did not initially address the issue of slavery or the role of women in a society that was viewed via a white patriarchal lens. Mrs. Powell was trying to find her role in this new government, and Benjamin Franklin was trying to explain to her and to others in attendance that the document was a work in progress that needed to be updated by the people, not a handful of individuals. You see, the Constitution does not call for domestic tranquility. It calls for justice. And we all have an obligation to do our part to ensure that the words of that document come to full fruition to all members of this republic. The latest Time magazine cover announces that we are now in a black renaissance. The West Indies cricket team of the 1980s and 1990s, the late Georgetown coach John Thompson, the late Cicely Tyson were all unapologetically black, and they found a platform to transform their community. The renaissance that we are now in is a reminder to be unapologetically black, however you define it, and to find your platform. But before you immerse yourself in this renaissance, you must study not just the iconic figures, but examine the masses that are often ignored. We are in a fight for equity, for social justice, education, healthcare, and economics. Within the black community, we cannot have this dichotomy of us versus them to cause greater division. Caribbean versus American versus African, class distinctions, educational distinctions, colorism, and colorism. And if you don't hear me the first 3 times, colorism, and our political ideologies. One of the founders of my fraternity, Vernon Woodton Tandy, said, we must fight till hell freezes over, and then fight on the ice. And in the midst of this fight, if they don't give you a seat at the table, according to Shirley Chisholm, will bring a folding chair. And the voice of this generation is also speaking. Poet laureate Amanda Gorman reminded us during the inauguration. She said, being American is more than a pride we inherit. It is the past we step into and how we repair it. For my final act this evening, I want to read some of my heroes. This is a list of my family and extended family. This is an acknowledgement of the sacrifices they have made and the example they have set for me and members of my family. Some are still alive and some have departed to heaven. Many of these folks are blood relatives and others are not. But especially among Caribbean and Black folks, if you have known me all or most of your life, that makes you an auntie or an uncle. But as I read these names, I want you to think about your heroes in your family and the sacrifices that they've made that you may not have realized. My heroes: Alice Farley, my grandmother; Grace Liverpool, my mother; Romina Grant, my late sister; Lennox H. Small Sr., my father; Dr. Patrick and Diane Liverpool; Herman Liverpool; Gordon Liverpool; Wilma Goodrich; Charles and Hilda Sadu; Basil and Pamela Butcher; Stanley Rollaire; June Rollaire; Sheila Cato; Dr. Harold and Elaine Lucius; Viola Richardson; John Stokes Sr., Mary Chivas; Jennifer Ingram; Ann Gordon; John and Charlene Jackson. The time that we are in now, this is not a soon-come moment. Again, this is not a soon-come moment. This is an urgency of now. But before we and the next generation can step into the Renaissance with full ammunition, we must study, respect, and honor the heroes among us. Because we must not be victims, but we must be protagonists of our stories and experiences. Now, it's time to do your homework. Thank you.
Got to unmute that phone.
Wow. Wow, that was truly amazing. This is the first time I'm meeting this gentleman, and I am so impressed right now, sir. You have just created some fire. You have just started some fire inside of me right now, and it seems like you have been ablaze for a long time. There is also another phrase that we use back home when they call it Medea. Medea. So right now we're going to drop off the soon come and use Medea. We are here this evening because Medea making things happen at this time. We are a blessed people, the best people on this planet Earth. And so I don't want to say anything much over what you have said. It is an amazing presentation. Let's put our hands together, ladies and gentlemen, for our Dr. Lennox Small. Put our hands together. God's blessings be upon you, sir.